Going live. Hello, welcome to the Hero Report podcast. My name is Ari Cohen. I'm a professor of political science at the University of Nebraska. And over there on the other end, I see Matt Langdon coming to us live from down under. It's snowing here, Matt, or it's been snowing for a couple of days. How's your weather?
It is not snowing here. It's going to be sunny and about 75 to 80 today.
Wow, rough life.
Yeah, it's been a tough week.
I bet. You've been enjoying all the internet discussion of winter, I'm sure, from all your friends on Twitter and Facebook while you enjoy summer.
I have. I was dropping my kid off at school this morning and telling her about the 8 inches of snow that fell last night where we used to live.
Yes, indeed. I'm sure it's much better to not have snow.
It's definitely an advantage.
Yeah. Well, Matt, it's been a long time since we last met here on a Hangout to have a Hero podcast, but it's certainly time to get back to it, and so I hope we can get back into a regular podcasting routine. I know the people out there have been left without the Hero Report podcast for too many months. They've been clamoring for it, so here we are back again. And the occasion of our return is to talk about what you and I have been talking about kind of off podcast. That is this notion of living a heroic life, or steps we can take to prepare ourselves for heroism, or something along those lines. And that seemed like a pretty good idea for a podcast, and so here we are to talk a little bit about it.
Yeah, I think we both we've certainly talked about it a lot, and it seems that there are other people coming to that conclusion as well. And I think really our conclusion is that rather than focusing on the end results or the theoretical future event where we might need to be heroic, we need to focus on the here and now for people. Give them something and give us something to work on a day-to-day basis that's rewarding and important, as well as preparing for that theoretical moment of heroism in the future.
Yeah, and I think that's really, I mean, you've hit on the two, what I think are the two critical points here, right? That we're talking about things that you can do in the moment, concrete ways to live, to prepare yourself, and we're talking about sort of a future where you might be called on to act heroically, and then the question is, how does one prepare oneself for that? And so we think we have some ideas, and we want to start thinking them through. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the other part of this came from your sort of realization that we can frame it as a way to be the self that you think you are, to be the person that you think you are. That idea of, everyone thinks that they would do the heroic thing, or not, maybe not everyone, but certainly it's a common statement. Yeah, I would definitely help that person, or I would definitely stand up when all these other people weren't. But we know factually, and we've talked about this on the podcast before, we know from real life and data and all of these stories that most people don't do the heroic thing. So that's the entire premise of the book, right? That by living a heroic life, you can be the hero that you think you are.
Right. And again, I think it's important to say too, I think people have a sense that they want to do something important. They want their lives to count for something. They want there to be meaning in what they do, what they have done. People have a conception of themselves that, they generally would like it to be a positive conception, right? And what we're suggesting here is that, in some sense, it takes work, right? It's not so simple as to say, well, I'm a good person, and so if a situation requires someone to do something difficult, I'm going to be the kind of person who steps up and does it. We all want to think that about ourselves, but there's a difference between thinking that we're that kind of person and actually being that kind of person. You have to do the work to make sure that you'll, as I've been saying, that you'll be the person that you think you are. Yeah, it's a matter of training, right? Is what I want to suggest, rather than like a characteristic that you possess, right? It would be really, really bad news, it seems to me, if we had to possess this kind of characteristic, right? I have to be this kind of person, because if I'm not, what can I do, right? But the fact of the matter is, I think it's something that we can work toward, right? It's in some sense, heroism is less of a characteristic and more of an activity. And in that sense, we can all start working toward being that sort of person.
Yeah, and it lines up very well with a quote that Tim Ferriss shared on social media recently, and maybe you know how to pronounce this Greek poet's name, Archilochus, I'm guessing is the pronunciation. But he said, we don't rise to the level of our expectations, we fall to the level of our training. And I think that just sums up everything that you just said, that we can hope that we're going to be great, but really we're going to be as great as we've trained to be. And I think, it's easy to apply. We could say, it's easy to say to someone, well, would you expect that you're going to be able to swim very well if you jump into the pool without having trained to swim? And everyone would say, well, of course not. But for some reason, this idea that we would do the right thing doesn't fit in with skill acquisition as it does with those hard skills, I think.
Right, and it's because we think very positively about ourselves, right? I believe the best about myself. I want to be the kind of person who would do this, this thing, stand up for others, put myself in harm's way, whatever the case may be. But unfortunately, when push comes to shove, it's much harder to actually do it. It's one thing to think about it, right? And I ask my students this all the time, right? And it's really fascinating because if you talk to your students, if you talk to them about human nature, they're very quick to believe that we're bad, right? That if there were no rules, we would do all sorts of bad things, whatever we could get away with. But when you ask them about themselves and whether they would do the hard thing that helps someone else but might put themselves or their family in danger, they don't think for very long before they say, yes, I know I absolutely would do that, right? So in some sense, they think of themselves as a kind of exception, or whatever it is, right? And that's how they explain the fact that in fact in the world it's really a rare few, who stand out and step up, right? And they think of themselves. Everybody wants to think of themselves as a member of that rare group. But having looked at that, at some of the members of that group, right? You and I have done a little bit of research here. Those people didn't just fall into heroism, right? And those people weren't born to be heroic. Those people, they worked at it, right? And so, and the truth is, I'm guessing that most of them didn't think they were working at it when they were doing it. But what we're proposing is that you can consciously do that, right? That you can say, here are, a few things I'm going to work on doing every day or every week or whatever the case may be, and doing those things. They might have, and this is the real key for me, they might have no future purpose, right? Because as we've talked about before on the Hero Report, you need the situation to arise. And it might be the case that the situation does not arise. You are not called upon to act heroically, right? So you might never do something heroic. But that doesn't mean that there are no tangible benefits to doing what we're talking about, because at the very worst, if you're doing these sorts of things, you're leading a good life, right? You're actually making the choices you think you'll make, right? You're doing the things that you say are important to you. I've started calling this living authentically, right? After talking about it for 15 weeks with students who were reading ancient Greek texts, I think that authentic living is a real virtue. And so that's sort of where I want to push people, right? I mean, even if you're never going to be a hero, right? You never have to put your life on the line. That's actually probably great news, right? I mean, that's great news for me. I don't want to be in that situation, but I do want to be in a situation where I'm helping other people all the time, right? Where I'm doing things to prepare myself on the off chance that I should have to do something um, that people would recognize as, what do I want to say, conventionally heroic.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think I had an experience yesterday that speaks to the idea that everyone's bad initially and would break all the rules. We watched the Super Bowl yesterday with an American student teacher who's just arrived in our small town of 2,000 people 1 week ago. And her experience at the school, and this is what I've just started dropping my daughter off at the school each day, they have a huge sort of a huge grounds. And there's one staff member on duty in the morning in charge of all hundreds of the kids, but they're not there in a supervisory role. They're there for help if the kids need help with something. If there is an emergency, they're there. But there are kids everywhere out of sight. No fences keeping them in, no gates keeping them in. There's gates open all around the place. And nobody runs away. Nobody does anything crazy. And it was very jarring for her to see that coming from the Midwest. And I think it's very, I was as I walked out this morning to come back to do this podcast, I was thinking just how interesting it is when you give kids the responsibility to behave correctly, they behave correctly. But if you bar them in and treat them like they can't make decisions, then they start pushing against those boundaries and testing it. But I think that just struck me as being the opposite of what, the people, that idea that people do think that everyone's inherently bad. So talking about, we're talking about training, what are the things that we think people need to be doing for this? What can people be doing on a daily basis that's going to improve their life now and prepare them for heroism?
Yeah, that's the operative question, right? And so we've talked about this, and we've developed kind of a list, right? And we've been trying to winnow that down, right? Figure out, can we pick the 4 most important or the 5 most important? But we think there's a bunch of them. And I think one of the ways to proceed is to do a series of these sort of short podcasts where we talk about 1 or maybe 2, right? We introduce the concept as we've done, and then, pick one and talk a little bit about it and what it would look like and so on. So I'm kind of proposing, and you tell me what you think, I'm proposing we pick one now and kind of talk in depth about it. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense, actually. That's, rather than trying to squeeze it all into one short discussion.
Yeah.
So I think the one that interests me, and I think has somewhat disappeared from our culture, is the idea of collecting heroes. And Warren Buffett has a quote about it that I should have had ready for the podcast, but he says something along the lines of, you should collect. Well, I can find it. But basically, you should collect heroes because everybody needs them. And I just think, he says you're lucky in life if you have the right heroes. I advise all of you, to the extent you can, to pick out a few heroes. And I think that picking out part is sort of out of fashion, and that has definitely not always been the case. I mean, I think even a generation ago, I think people were much more, a generation before me, I suppose. There's another generation in front of me. That was definitely standard. I think people had their heroes, and they sort of followed everything that they could about them. And I get the impression that there are just too many these days, and maybe too many options, I think, but also too many competing celebrities. So I think there's, definitely in the past people held up celebrities as their heroes, and you have that relationship with a celebrity that you know everything about them. When I was 18, it was Winona Ryder and Christian Slater. I mean, I knew everything about them, and I think, and I'm not calling them heroes by any means, but I think we have a problem in choice now, that there are so many people to choose from that it's hard to choose one. And in today's internet sort of world, you don't have to spend much time finding out about somebody. So if you do discover Seneca, maybe all you do is read Wikipedia and click on a few links, and there's not much more to know. And I think in the past, when you found someone that sparked your imagination, you sort of delved into them more. You went to the library, or you specifically waited for a movie or a documentary to come on TV. But now you can really exhaust the information about a person very quickly and move on. And I think there's something there. There's something there, and we've got to work out how to create that spark again, I think.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I'm not sure how this works in terms of generations and timing and so on, but it's an interesting question I'll have to pose to my students, right? I want to ask them if they read biographies, right? Because when I was younger, I read a lot of biographies. I would go to the library and I would check out books on various historical, heroes, right? And I would read up on them and learn about them. And a good biography gives you all sort. I mean, well, this is what I love about a good biography. Actually, it does exactly what we're kind of proposing here, right? It gives you all the background on the person. Doesn't simply give you a kind of narrow description, but really tells you as much as it can, as much as the biographer is able, about the circumstances that led to the person becoming the person that we know, right? And it's in that, I think, that the real power of picking your heroes is to be found, right? Because for me, crucial part of sort of this heroism training, or whatever we want to call it, heroic living, the crucial part is seeing these examples, not simply in the act that they did, right, but how they arrived at it, who these people were, such that they made the choices that they made, right, when confronted with the situation that elevated them into the position that we know. What resources did they have at their disposal, right? Who were their role models? How did they, how did they choose the life path that led them to this heroic moment? I think these are really crucial questions that quite often we miss today, because we focus on the moment. I have this, this conversation we've often had about the people who have jumped onto subway tracks to save people from oncoming trains. If you focus just on the action, I think you're missing something absolutely crucial, right? I mean, you always talk about these guys in New York, and the thing that I think you point out rightly isn't simply the fact of the heroic moment, right? But it's all of the, it's the prep work that they didn't really know they were doing, right? They didn't see themselves as making conscious choices to prepare themselves for the day when somebody in front of them accidentally fell from the platform. But that's what they were doing, right? And so it's having that. Most people don't have that biographical information about Wesley Autry, for example. But in having access to that, I think we really get some insight, and it shows us the importance of picking our heroes.
Yeah, yes. So I think that's one important element, right, of having these heroes, is that we can look at what happened to get them there. But I think the other part, and the obvious part, I suppose, is the inspiration piece.
Okay.
So people connect to something, whether it's the circumstances, whether it's the act, whether it's a quote, a personality. There's something there, and I think there's something missing there too in today's, certainly with kids, in today's opportunities for them to see heroes, or to find heroes, I should say. And so I think one of the keys is for us and others to find the key story to these heroes. What's the one snippet of the story that is really going to show what this is all about? Someone, and I'll find it as we're talking, but there's a great book called Heroes for My Son, I think, and Heroes for My Daughter. I can't remember which one was first, but it was written for this guy's kids, obviously, and he had picked out heroes that he wanted a lesson to be clear from each one to his kid. And so, and I've mimicked that a little bit with my field guide to heroes as well. But Amelia Earhart, I know, was one of the examples. And rather than just doing a biography of achievements, it picked out one thing that she did and said, "This is why I want Amelia Earhart to be a hero for you." And I think it's condensing that story, maybe not even condensing, but it is picking out that core piece that a kid could grab onto. Because we know, I mean, that's one of the real drawbacks I see in the way that heroes are used in education today, is that everyone's using the same few of them. So in Black History Month, and I may have talked about this on the podcast before, I've certainly talked about it to people before, but rather than using Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks every year of every kid's 13 years at school, why don't we pick some others? Because there's certainly more to choose from. And I think the more exposure that kids get to these different heroes, the more likely that they're going to pick one and get obsessed with them. And with that obsession, really learn something and put something into them. I mean, this is something that's going to be left behind inside the kid for the rest of their life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So basically, I understand you to be saying, and I think you're right about this, that you have to find a kind of entry point, right? You have to have the one thing that's going to appeal, that's going to spark an interest. It's like an elevator story, right? If you've got 1 minute or 2 minutes to explain something, to pique someone's interest, what will you say? But I want to push you to say a little bit more about something, right? Is the problem here that there are too many options out there, or is the problem that there are too few, right? At the beginning, I think I heard you to be saying that there were, too many possible choices, some of whom, appeal for the wrong reasons, or we can't make sense of them. And then in the Black History Month example, too few, right? The same two people over and over again, essentially. Or is it some sort of combination of those things, do you think?
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because I think both problems exist, but they create different results. So I think there are too few being put forward by the gatekeepers of education, which is not just teachers by any means, but it's the media, it's publishing companies, it's whoever. It's more difficult to be meaningfully exposed to heroes, different heroes. But then on the flip side, as kids get exposed to different people through the internet, like if they go on Reddit and see, today I learned about so-and-so, that can be done in a few minutes once they have gone through it, and then I just wonder what more is there. I worry that there isn't enough of that analysis. So there isn't that curating. So you go on and you find a Wikipedia page and you find, the person's middle name and when they were born, which is all not relevant generally to the heroic part of the story, and certainly not going to capture somebody's attention, but it's all there for posterity. So where can the kids go to find heroic stories?
Yeah, well, your website.
Yeah, but there's not a lot of them going there.
Right. Well, that's the problem. There needs to be more, right? And I mean, the other problem that you face with the internet and with the explosion of information that we've seen, right, is that things go really quickly from here's the information about this person so you can learn it to a dissection of whether that person is really so good after all, right? So it's a very, very quick to we're very, very quick to tear people down, to find the problems, to expose the flaws. It used to be, I mean, I sound like maybe a grumpy old man here now, but it used to be the case that I could read an entire biography of someone and it would, especially insofar as it was a kid's biography, right? It was meant to inspire, it was meant to instruct. And then later, right, as I got older, I could read like a more academic treatment that explained the full, the full story of this person, right? That added complexity, that added detail. But first I learned, that there are some lessons I could take away from this person, even if it's not someone who's perfect, right? But I think that we've come to a place where we're asking for perfection from our heroes. And that turns out to be really problematic too, because nobody rises to that standard. And so really quickly, we go from learning about someone to learning about the problems with that person, why they weren't perfect, and so then we abandon them.
Yeah, and there's a lot of that sort of aspect in modern news of you have to present both sides of the story, or you're not telling the right, you're not being fair. And I think that's very damaging in lots of ways, but it is certainly damaging here as well. So it's, why not just say, look at what amazing thing this person did? And I don't think it has to be always tempered with, and here are the bad things they did. I think that can be part of the story in sort of bringing the reality that these people aren't superheroes or gods or angels or whatever, but the point of telling these stories is to inspire heroism, right?
And that latter part would itself be a good lesson later on, right? This person, who's admired for doing, action X, and we learn all about them, this also is not a perfect person, right? And in that sense, they might be very much like you, right? I mean, none of us are perfect, and to keep waiting for the perfect hero before we can say, here's someone who really inspires me, we may be waiting forever, right? I think that that's a very, very hard standard to meet. It's one that we don't expect of ourselves, right? I mean, I expect myself to make lots of mistakes. It's hard, right, when someone becomes well known for doing something really impressive and then goes on to do something that's that's unfortunate, not impressive, terrible, whatever. It's hard for people to separate those things out, right, and to say, here is a time when this person did something that was quite heroic, and that's something I would want to emulate if I could. But that doesn't mean I have to embrace everything about that person, right? There are plenty of things about the person I don't care for, right? And so the real challenge for me then is to understand the complexity of this person, situated in my understanding of the world and of people generally, and to say I want to emulate the good things and I want to avoid the bad things. Now, what can I do to be that person?
Yeah, absolutely. So just for reference, the book that I was talking about, Heroes for My Son and Heroes for My Daughter, is by Brad Meltzer, who is a popular author of many types of things, but he decided to write these couple of books for children. So I know he's a famous author, to the point where I invited him to speak at the Hero Roundtable, and he had a 5-figure speaking fee. So that explains both how popular he is and how he did not speak at the round table.
There you have it. Well, I think that what we're highlighting here is really one of the crucial aspects, right, to this kind of heroic life that we've been thinking a lot about, right? That there is something that's very, very valuable about picking your heroes, both the picking action itself, right, and everything that goes into it. This idea that I think you mentioned the word curating. I think that's a good way of thinking about this. And it's an action that you do, right, rather than having someone else do it for you, rather than, and it's not something you do quickly, right? It's not something you read one web page and you know the essential whomever, right? But that you spend some time with these people, you think about them in their complexity, and you allow yourself to be inspired, which frankly is hard to do because I think we've all become very cynical. But allowing oneself to be inspired, I think, is really an important part of this.
Yeah. So I think our goal in this series is going to be as instructional as possible. So what does that look like for somebody? What steps can they take? So I think the curation, I think you need to be deliberate about that. So you either get a notebook that's going to be your hero collection, whatever it is, and write down the names when you encounter them, and maybe you're noting down what books someone's recommended or what you've seen, or you could do, you could create an Evernote folder with notes, or just start saving bookmarks on your browser, whatever it might be. But yeah, don't let it stop with just collecting the name. So what other resources that people could use if they do find a name on in their online newspaper or on Reddit or on Facebook when somebody posts something. Where should they go? I mean, Wikipedia is an easy start, and I think the best thing that you can do with Wikipedia is click on some of the links to probably read more. What else could we be doing?
I mean, I think one thing that you sort of hinted at, but that seems to me to be really important, is something that we can do, and also that people who are searching for heroes can do, right? And that is to come up with that elevator speech, right? So, figure out what it is about this person that inspires you, right? Come up with 3 sentences, right? What are the 3 sentences about this person that you could tell to somebody else? And that's our job too, right? We have to think about the variety of people, right? People who have done heroic things in kind of different areas of life or whatever, and find a way to talk about those different kinds of people in ways that appeal, right? In ways that inspire, in ways that make people want to go and learn more. Whether that means, as you say, like doing internet research, going to Wikipedia, clicking on links, whether it means going to books, right? Talking to a librarian and figuring out, right? I mean, it's amazing, right? That people don't know, like, there are, in many of these cases, there are whole books devoted to these people. And so once you're bitten by that heroism bug, you could really do some in-depth study on these people. And so the idea is to both for us and for people we're talking to, we need to find out what that entrance point is for people and make it available, and then other people need to do the same, right? If you've got a hero that you've found, how do you explain it to somebody, right? How do you say, this is why this person inspires me, this is why this person, this is the thing that this person did that was unique, yeah, that was extraordinary. This is the kind of thing I hope I'll be able to do if the need arises. It's being able to talk like that, I think, is really important. And the way you do that, I think, is you have to spend time with it. You have to sit down, you have to write it down, you have to think about it.
Yeah, well, that was definitely the process for me in writing the field guide. Was in some, I mean, it was fairly easy to create a list that I wanted to put in the book, but then to write basically, 2 paragraphs summing up the person was very tough. Um, so a couple of online resources that I think people could use. We've had some guests on the show before who have lists of heroes on websites. So one is Anne Medlock and Giraffe Heroes. There's and there's hundreds of heroes profiled on that site with a lot of extra resources to find out more about them. And these people are typically unheralded, sort of unsung heroes. There's moralheroes.org, I think, by Jensen Kyle. He does a great job of really writing a comprehensive description of each hero. There's also on Facebook, and I don't know if they must have a website, but Mighty Girls, I think it's called. They are regularly, like to the point of daily, putting up girl heroes and really putting some detail into it and giving further reading and that sort of thing. And what else was I going to say? Oh, and then the galleryofheroes.com is my sort of collection that is aimed at a middle school audience. So it's fairly brief descriptions, just a couple of paragraphs, but then links to other resources. And one thing I've appreciated, and it was definitely my intention, was that a couple of schools recently have had their kids submitting heroes, and I think that's a great task that sort of ties all of what we've been talking about up. Is pick your hero and then write 3 paragraphs to describe them to the rest of the world. You know, picking out what makes a hero to you. So it's been really nice when those submissions have come in, because you really get to see some kids thinking about things. So I think those are the ones I can think of. Have you got any others that you can think of that people could start using right away to maybe sort of expose themselves to some new heroes?
No, that's a great start. And what I would suggest is people who listen to this, right? If you get this far, you're 30 minutes in. Send us 3 sentences, right? Send us an email about your hero, and get us excited about the person who excites you. We can start with that next time, right? When we get back together to do the next one of these, to talk about what we've heard. I think it's a great project that you've suggested, right? That this process, not just of picking it for yourself, but also internalizing this person's story to an extent that you can then explain to somebody else, right? That's really the key. And so, spend some time doing that for us. Send us your heroes. We want to know who inspires you. Tell us about that person.
Yeah, absolutely. It'd be cool to see if people, man, we should have put some thought into this beforehand, but we could do a hashtag and get people to do quick, they could do Vine videos or Instagram videos or Facebook videos. Just give yourself 10 to 30 seconds to say who your hero is. We'll put that in the blog post when the video goes up.
Hashtag my hero.
Yeah, there you go. I wonder how populated that hashtag is. But we'll So check out the blog post to see in the YouTube description, and we'll get that up.
Absolutely. Well, thanks, Matt. This was a great start. I think that we've got quite a few of these to do. I think we have a number of kind of practical things that people can do, and I think this is a great jumping off. Hopefully, we can do each one. We can have a little, something that the audience can do going forward, that they can tell us about, that they can tell each other about. That's a good little thing to tack on here. That would be fun.
Absolutely. All right. So until next time.
All right. We'll start doing these more regularly, Hero Report listeners. So get ready.
We are. It's all part of the master plan.
That's right. All right. Well, thank you, Matt. Thank you, everyone, for watching. I'm looking forward to seeing whatever hashtag we choose. We'll tell you about it as soon as we can get this put up on the blog. And then I'm really looking forward to seeing what people tweet or Instagram or Facebook at us.
Absolutely. So it's been great to be back on the in the saddle, and we'll see everyone again soon.
Absolutely. Thanks. Bye-bye.